Gallup does this global survey of the workforce every year, and they came out with one this past August. And they said that globally speaking, 23% of the workforce is engaged in what they're doing for work. In the US, it's 31%, but the vast majority are not. So it's kind of sad. The mistake is a lot of planning without enough prior dreaming. Very good at planning and setting goals and measuring progress toward achieving them. Not enough prior dreaming about the life you want to have in the first place.
Welcome to Notre Dame Stories, the official podcast of the University of Notre Dame, where we push the boundaries of discovery, embracing the unknown for a deeper understanding of our world. Talking to Joe Holt is like having a conversation with your 5 most interesting friends all at once. A former Jesuit priest, an Ironman triathlete, stockbroker, corporate attorney, and now professor in the Mendoza College of Business. He has a lot to say about the twists and turns of life and how we measure success along the way. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Jenna.
It's so nice to see you. I'm excited for our conversation.
So
Thanks for
am
joining
I.
me. Good,
Yeah,
good. And
invitation.
we have the beautiful sun shining into the Stayer Center, which we were talking off camera is a welcome treat here in Northern Indiana.
Absolutely.
What initially sparked my interest in a conversation with you was an article you wrote for Forbes about achieving goals. So tell me your approach, or how do you talk to your students about success?
For myself personally, it's not so much the new year that kicks it off. There's never a point in the year when I don't have a goal. It's kind of, I'm like always striving. What I try to do is think of a goal that is formidable but doable. And then what I find helpful is creating an audience. So when I decided I was going to try an Ironman triathlon, which was quite ambitious for me, because when I decided I was going to do that, I could only swim one length of the pool, and the Ironman is 2.4 miles, so it's 152 lengths of the pool. But I had some friends who had completed Ironman triathlons, and I told them I was going to do that. So that's my audience. So when you do that, those are people who are going to check back in with you. Hey, how's that going? You're making progress. How's the training going and everything? It just makes it more likely you'll stick with it. I think a lot of times people set a goal and they don't tell anybody about it, and then it's easier to drop it when you haven't told anybody about it, when you've kind of gone public. And I did a social media post, I'm going to try this. And then that kind of commits me to it a little more. So that is something that I found helpful.
Let's talk a little bit more about goals, Joe. What makes a good goal? How do we know we're pushing ourselves enough, but not too hard, that we still can have those small, manageable milestones?
It's a great question. I think to me, a good goal is one that helps you to grow in some important area of life without stressing you out. So it's kind of and Jim Collins says about, big, hairy, audacious goals, that there ought to be a gulp factor. Like it shouldn't be a layup. It shouldn't be super easy. If you're 100% confident you're going to achieve it, then it's not ambitious enough. So there ought to be like me doing the Ironman. Oh my God, can I do that? Kind of thing. There ought to be a gulp factor, but there shouldn't be a freak out factor. So it shouldn't be a layup, but it also shouldn't be a half court shot.
Okay.
Maybe a 3-pointer.
If a 3-pointer is attainable for you, which it's not for me.
Or me. So that also, the way I think about good goals is that they help you get out of some kind of rut that you've been in life. So when it comes to fitness, for decades, my definition of when I was in shape was, could I run a 5K on a day's notice, and can I bench press my body weight? But now that I've gotten into triathlons, my definition of fitness is, can I do an Olympic distance triathlon on a day's notice and bench press my body weight? So the Olympic distance is swim 0.93 miles, bike 25, and run a 10K. So to me, that's now, so my floor is now at a higher place. But, I think a lot of us get into ruts in lots of areas in life. So are there ways that I could be a better teacher? I'm always trying to get better are there ways that I could be a better spouse, a better parent? Could you be a better friend? Lord knows I could be a better Catholic. So what are all the ways I could do that? A good goal makes your life better. A great goal makes life better for others as well, I think.
Now, we've talked about determining if a goal is achievable. So what are some of your broad philosophies or maybe frameworks that you try to instill in your students about how to wrestle with those questions?
Yeah, I mean, I was a Jesuit for 12 years, and Jesuits are characterized by what I call a holy restlessness, always striving for more. So they never content themselves with just good enough. So for a Jesuit, the question is not, is the thing you're doing, the goal you're setting, a good one? The question is it the best possible thing you could be doing? Is it the best possible goal you could be achieving? And they're not content until you get with that. So like, when the pandemic happened, there were lots of things you could do to help. You could kind of track illnesses, get food for elderly folks. And all of that is wonderful and really good stuff. But I'd had some prior experience as a nurse's aide working with a terminal cancer patient. 20% of the cases and deaths early on were frontline healthcare workers. Given my experience, I thought I could help out in that way. That would be a better thing for me to do. One of the things that fascinates me about universities, you hear a lot of talk about intelligence, knowledge, analytical ability, problem-solving skill. When's the last time you heard a substantial talk about wisdom? Nobody talks about wisdom. It's like a really big thing to not talk about. What does it mean to be wise? And are you living a life that is wise? And as a Catholic school, to what extent does faith shape or inspire what you're doing? But it's interesting that I think when you ask people if they pray, a lot of times when they say yes, what they mean is that they say prayers. But you pray in such a way that God can get a word in edgewise. George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, wrote this play, St. Joan of Arc. And there's a scene where the king brings St. Joan before him, and she talks about God communicating to her with these voices, telling her what to do. And the king says, why did God send voices to you and not to me? I'm the king, not you. And she said, well, God does send the voices to you, but you don't hear them. You don't go out in the field at night to listen to them. The Angelus rings and you cross yourself and then you get on with it. It's kind of perfunctory that way. So how many people are really kind of listening?
Joe, we talked about the dictionary definition of success. When it comes to success in business or when it comes to what makes a good job, how are those sometimes different? And how do you talk to your students about that?
What I do with them is ask them a question of, what makes for a good job. And the hypothetical I give them, high paying and prestige is fine so far as it goes. But I ask them, can you think of somebody who's got a high paying or prestigious job for whom it's actually not a good job? So what are the other things that go into it being, that's fine so far as it goes, but what else goes into it being a good job? And they think of things where, it's not consistent with your values and beliefs. I always ask them, are you going to be working someplace where you can be who you are, morally and spiritually speaking? Are you working someplace that encourages your better instincts or makes it harder for you to follow your better instincts? Are you working someplace that's going to enable you to have the work-life balance that you want to have and have the time for the relationships that matter most? Are you working someplace where you feel you're making a positive difference? So the guy, Patrick Lencioni, wrote this book, The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And one of the signs is irrelevance. Irrelevance is the sense that the work we do around here really doesn't make a difference. We're really not helping anybody. So it's hard to be enthusiastic and do your best work when you don't feel you're making a positive difference that way. I talk about it, there's a difference between negative freedom and positive freedom. So negative freedom is freedom from the absence of external constraints. I can go where I want to go, do what I want to do, say what I want to say. I think when most Americans think we're free people, I think that's what they mean. Positive freedom is freedom for. So given that you can do whatever you want to do, what is most worth doing? What is worthy of devoting your time, talent, and energy to? So a good job is one that you feel is worth devoting your time, talent, and energy to. And when you meet Jesus at the end of life and he says, okay, let's look back and see what you did with the time, talent, and energy I entrusted to you, are you going to be happy with what you see? Attaining wealth, fame, position says nothing about the kind of person you are. Though it defines success entirely in terms of having. You have wealth, you have fame, you have an impressive position. Says nothing about being, your character and the quality of your relationships. So if you have wealth, fame, and impressive position, but you're a jerk, nobody likes and trusts you, is your life a success or not? And it says nothing about have you made life better for other people or not. It says nothing about that. And clearly that should have something to do with success.
And what you're touching on too, I think, Joe, gets to my final question, which is your own professional career and personal life has had so much variety. And so in working towards whatever you were working at the time or your larger goals, how have you left space for God to bring you into a new direction? And what advice would you have for us when we know we need to slow down and listen to where we should be as well?
Psalm 46, verse 10, be still and know that I'm God. I think for our culture, really great at getting things done. I don't think we're very good at being still. Not something, most of us really need to be on the go. The last day of class when I teach ethics is devoted to the topic of solitude and self-reflection, just that kind of being quiet, because if you don't somehow build that into life, that's going to be a problem. But I was actually the best professor, the most impactful professor I had in 26 years of school was Peter Gomes, who was a university chaplain at Harvard, and I took a homiletics course with him. And he's just a good, holy, and wise man. And he said to us, trust God, trust yourself, and trust the people of God. And that always kind of resonated with me. But it seems to me that life has always seemed like this treasure hunt, where at every step you get a clue that tells you how to get to the next step, but not to the end. And I think a lot of peace is just learning to kind of accept that. I don't know how it's going to end. So you make the best decision you can based on the evidence that life and the Lord of life are giving you in the moment, and then you live the decision, and then see how that works out, but always be open to maybe there's something different. One of the things I like to reflect on is in the Gospels, when Jesus calls the disciples, Peter and James and John, it says they left everything and followed him. And I think we read that over too quickly, because that's like a big thing, leaving everything to follow him. I mean, they had a hometown, they had jobs, Peter was married, they had friends and all of that. So my question to the students is, when they left everything to follow him, to what extent did they know where they were going? I think the answer is not at all. They knew who they were following, but they didn't know where they were going. And by the way, if they did know where they were going, would they have followed? Right. Is it? So to me, that's what life was like for the first disciples. Why should it be different for us? Is kind of it. So I think I've always been open to just different things possible and a God of surprises. I tell the students that the words I want on my tombstone are, he meant well. It wasn't very good, but his heart was in the right place. But I said, success to me will be like dying and meeting Jesus and hearing him say, well done, good and faithful servant. And I don't think I'm on path for that yet, but that's where I want to be. So just always remembering that, life is wonderful, the world is amazing, filled with incredible possibilities, but it ends.
Thank you for this intriguing conversation. We have lots to think about. I appreciate you, Joe. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate you. Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us for Notre Dame Stories, the official podcast of the University of Notre Dame. Find us on stories.nd.edu and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.